I've seen it said that the opposite of love is indifference. Right now, I would disagree. Anyway, for me, the opposite of love is hate. Blind, seething hate. I used to love my wife with all my heart and soul. I would have done anything for her, even take a bullet. But that's not the case anymore. She ripped my heart out and destroyed my once happy life. And now it was time for me to destroy her. The house was dark as I crept slowly up the stairs, doing my best not to give myself away. Of course, the two traitors in there in what used to be the master bedroom I shared with my wife couldn't hear me anyway because of all the noise they were making. I reached the bedroom door, which was only partially closed, and swung it all the way open with the 12-gauge pump-action shotgun I had with me. There they were, my soon-to-be ex-wife, Alice, and my boss, Jake Harmon. I chambered around and watched as the two bastards stopped and stared at me in surprise. Nothing gets someone's attention like the sound of a cartridge being chambered in a shotgun. Jake got off Alice. "What are you doing here, wuss?" he asked. "You're supposed to be in Jonesboro. Why are you here? You want to watch a real man have your wife? Is that it? Are you some kind of pervert or something?" Alice giggled at that. "Yeah, baby, he wants to watch a real man make me feel good," she said. Jake laughed and stepped toward me. That's when it all started. I didn't say anything as I shot my load into his crotch, blowing his intimate parts all to hell. He screamed in pain, falling to the floor. Alice's screams merged with his screams in almost perfect harmony. I took aim and fired again, this time blowing the top half of Jake's head off. Alice continued to scream, so I turned my attention to her. The first shot drowned out her screams as it took most of her face off. The next 15 shots left her a bloody mess on the bed. I wasn't done and kept shooting, alternating between Jake and Alice. At one point, I looked down and saw that my feet were almost drowning in a pile of shotgun shell casings. Damn it, I wondered. How many rounds are in this thing? I kept loading and firing round after round into the slime that used to be Jake and Alice. Finally, I stopped, and my rage passed. The room smelled like gunpowder, and I could see smoke hanging in the air in a thick blanket. I looked at the bloody mess in front of me and realized my life was over. As soon as the police arrived, they would probably shoot me to death. If they didn't, I'd probably end up on death row. No. Thank you. I checked and found I had one more round left. I put the muzzle of the shotgun to my chin, then leaned over and pulled the trigger with my right hand. I sat up on my bed, my body wet with sweat. At first, I didn't recognize my surroundings. Then it came to me. I was staying for 24 hours at a hotel in Jonesboro, Arkansas, and had been there since Sunday. It was early Thursday morning. I was here to take care of updating the client base at Jake's direction. The job was finished on Wednesday, and I did my paperwork before I went to bed. I planned to return by car after checking out of the hotel after sunrise. As my mind cleared from the remnants of the nightmare, I took a breath and looked at my watch. It was only 3:30 in the morning. Shit, I thought to myself. I'll never be able to sleep again. I got out of bed and washed my face, then made a cup of coffee. I turned on the TV and tried to calm myself down. This wasn't the first time I'd experienced this nightmare, and something told me it wouldn't be the last. It had been like this almost every night for the past week, ever since I'd first learned of Alice's betrayal. Each nightmare was very similar, with the only difference being my favorite weapon. I remember once dreaming that I was holding a minigun and riddling their bodies with thousands of rounds of ammunition. In another dream, I was actually carrying a rocket-propelled grenade and blasted them, along with their bedroom, into oblivion. Then there was a dream in which I actually used a nuclear device and destroyed half the county along with 2 traitors. Mind you, I'm not normally prone to violence, and although I spent 4 years in the Marine Corps, I've never once fired a weapon in anger. Sure, I own a few guns, including a 12-gauge shotgun. Heck, everyone in these parts has a gun or two. But I've never once considered using any of them against another human being. That is, until recently. Why the change, you may ask? Let me tell you. My name is Thomas Jefferson Langley. My parents had a weakness for history, so I was born with that name. My sister and only sibling was named after Betsy Ross, seriously. I joined the Marines right out of high school and became a nuclear, biological, and chemical defense specialist. With the exception of a one-year tour in Okinawa, Japan, I spent my time in the States, mostly working as an instructor. For the last 6 months of my deployment, I was one of the guys who ran the gas chamber on the base where I served. I realized early on in my military service that a person with my skills was pretty much useless in the civilian world, so I went to school and got a degree in networking and business. It took 3 years to get a 2-year degree, so I quit at the end of my 4-year term and went back to school using my benefits. When I graduated, I went to work as an account representative for Empire Tech Solutions, a nationwide IT company headquartered in my hometown in Missouri. I met Alice when I was doing a survey for the local newspaper. She worked as an editor and was one of the people who decided which photos would work best for their articles. We chatted, dated, fell in love, and eventually married. That was 5 years ago. The next 4.5 years were good. Alice and I got along pretty well, and we enjoyed spending time together whenever we could. We made love several times a week and started talking about having kids. We made some pretty decent money, so we bought an old 4-bedroom farmhouse outside of town, spread out on 1.5 acres of land. It took a bit of work, but we both loved it. She liked the fact that it was a bit rustic, and I liked the detached workshop on the property. We both also liked the fact that the master bedroom had its own gas fireplace, and there was plenty of room for the kids. And then the world went into tatters, at least for me. My boss, Bill Michaels, retired, and the company started looking for his replacement. I thought this would be a great opportunity for me, so I applied for the job. I didn't realize it, but John Carlson, the man in charge of the company's service operations nationwide, told me that I had been seriously considered, but the board had chosen someone else, Jake Harmon. I looked Harmon up on the company's intranet and found that he was being transferred here from Boston, where he had worked as a senior account representative in the Northeast region of the country. He had a little more seniority than me, but not that much. His uncle also happened to be a high-ranking member of the board of directors. Naturally, he got the job. I studied the picture of his face and immediately took a dislike to him. There was something about his crooked smile that just screamed trouble. He came aboard and made the rounds. The women in the office reached for him like moths to a flame. He was a few inches taller than me and quite muscular. He smiled that same crooked smile when he shook my hand the first time we met. "Well, I'm finally meeting my opposition," he said. "I'm told you almost got my job. Don't worry, I won't let it affect our relationship." "I'm glad to hear that," I told him. He smiled and walked out of my office. Something about him was really pissing me off, but I wasn't entirely sure what it was. One night after dinner, I told Alice about it. "Why don't you invite him to dinner sometime?" she said. "Maybe you could break the ice with him." "Is he married?" I shook my head. "I don't think so," I said. "I didn't see that in his online bio." "Maybe he's just a little lonely," she said. "A lonely guy in a new city surrounded by unfamiliar faces. He must be having a hard time adjusting, especially after living in Boston." "Maybe you're right," I said. The next day, I invited him to dinner, and he readily accepted. "And feel free to bring your family if you want," I told him. "I don't have a family," he said. "It's just me, but I'd love to have dinner with you and your wife. Thank you for the invitation. Can I get you anything?" "Just your appetite," I said. "All right," he said. "I'll be there." He arrived on time, and overall we had a good evening. We got to know each other a little, and I thought we had developed a kind of rapport. Alice had done her best, cooking a stew with potatoes and vegetables. She even put some in a plastic container for him to take home. "He doesn't seem like such a bad guy," Alice said after he left. "You two seem to get along well." "Yeah, I guess so," I said. Still, in the back of my mind, I had my doubts. "By the way, that was a wonderful pot roast. Let me help you with the dishes, and then I'll thank you properly upstairs," I added, slapping her on the ass. She giggled, then gargled into the dining room to start clearing the table. The next day at work, Jake stopped by my office. "I just wanted to thank you for dinner last night," he said. "It was a fantastic stew your wife made." "You're welcome," I said. "Yes, Alice is a very good cook." He smiled and nodded his head. I couldn't help but wonder what else he was thinking about. "Look, Tom, I need you to start getting out of town more often," he said. "I know my predecessor limited your time out of town, but I'm concerned that we might run into some business lapses if we don't get a little more aggressive." "What are we talking about?" I asked. He was right. Bill made sure I didn't take more than one trip at most every 2 weeks, worried about how it would affect my family life. That was one of the things I really appreciated about him. "I'm thinking maybe 1 trip a week," Jake said. "I know it can be hard with Alice, but I'll make sure you're well compensated for your time away from home." "When will that start?" I asked. "Next week," he said. That wasn't much time, considering it was already Friday. "In fact, I'd like you to go to St. Louis on Monday. Peters and Listrom are discussing updating some of their servers in preparation for tax season, and I'd like you to assess the situation and make some recommendations. This is usually done remotely, but I'd like you to be a little more hands-on." Peters and Listrom was an accounting firm we've worked with for years, and that was the first I heard of the update. "Okay," I said. "What kind of timeline are we talking about here? It won't take me more than a few hours at most." "You're forgetting that they have branches all over the city," Jake said. "You'd have to visit them all." Shit, I thought. It could take 2 or 3 days, maybe even 4. "Okay," I said. "I'll let Alice know. She won't be happy." "I think she'll get over it when she sees your paycheck," Jake said before he left my office. Alice wasn't happy that I would be gone potentially 4 days the following week, but I took her out to dinner and dancing that night, and we spent most of the weekend in bed. "Call me when you get settled, and I'll look forward to calling you every day," she said as I stowed my stuff in the car. Fortunately, St. Louis was close enough that I could get there by car. "And you better be on your best behavior." "Aren't I always like this?" I asked before kissing her. I called her cell phone as I settled into my suite in St. Louis and later that night after my first client meeting. I called her home phone every night, and we enjoyed nice, long conversations that always ended on a happy note. As it turned out, I was done with the client early Thursday morning, so I drove home, planning to surprise my wife. We had a wonderful reunion, and I thought everything was going to be fine. The next couple weeks didn't go too badly. I ended up only being away for 1 night during those weeks. After that, things started to change. The trips got longer and longer, and for the next 4 weeks I was gone 4 days, and 1 trip lasted a full 5 days. Jake was true to his word, and I did see a significant increase in my paycheck, but it barely made up for the time away from Alice. At first, Alice seemed to be able to cope with the time away, but I could tell that it started to take its toll on her after the 4th week. After I got home that week, I thought I caught a whiff of cigarettes. Both Alice and I smoked when we first met. After we got married, we decided together to kick the habit. It was hard at first, but eventually we got through it. We had been smoke-free for about 2 years when it all started. I asked Alice if she had smoked while I was away. "Yes," she said. "I'm sorry, it's just so hard when you're not here." "I understand," I told her. "You realize I don't have a choice. Jake is the one who sends me everywhere." "I understand," she said. "I just don't like it, that's all. I wish you were home more often." "I think so too," I said. "Maybe I'll talk to Jake and see if he'll calm down a little." I did talk to Jake about it, but he interrupted me and said it was part of the job. "If I don't like it," he said, "I can find another job." As someone from a good company who needs to pay the bills, I accepted it and kept working, but still brushed through some things. About a week later, I had just gotten home from a trip and was getting ready to go to bed when Alice asked me to turn on the fireplace. We both liked it on when we made love, so I went to turn it on. That's when I noticed that the pilot light was out. I wondered what could have caused this to happen, and I couldn't get it to light up. So I shut off the gas supply to the unit and made a mental note to call a technician. Because of my schedule, it was a couple weeks before I could get someone in to take a look at it. After running the diagnostics, the technician looked at me and shook his head. "I'm sorry, Mr. Langley," he said, "but that regulator is defective. It's probably been in there for at least 60 years. "Can you replace it?" I asked. He shook his head. "I'm afraid not," he said. "They stopped making them about 30 years ago. Frankly, I'm surprised it's lasted this long without causing problems. Do you realize there could have been a hell of an explosion up here? If I were you, I'd replace that whole insert in its entirety. I'm not sure when I'll have time to do that, I said. I'm on a pretty tight schedule. He handed me a business card. Well, when you have time, come and see what we have, he said. Heck, we have remote-controlled units, and you can control one of them from your smartphone over the internet. In the meantime, I wouldn't turn on the gas in that thing, or you could get in serious trouble. Thanks, I said, taking his business card. Unfortunately, I still couldn't find the time to replace the insert, despite Alice's constant reminders. Jake kept sending me out, sometimes for the weekend. As a result, the house got very cold. Our sex life had all but disappeared, and Alice began to speak very briefly and curtly to me. I did my best to maintain some semblance of calm, but it wasn't easy. As the trips went on, Alice got worse and worse. Jake didn't seem to care, though, as he kept referring me to one client and another. Several times when I called my home phone, I got an answering machine, and when I called Alice's cell phone, I went straight to voicemail. When I asked her about it, all she did was make excuses. "I'm sorry, but I decided to go out for a drink with the girls and I didn't hear my phone ring," she would say. And then, the worst thing that could happen, happened. I finished my site inspection a day early and decided to come home to surprise Alice. As it turned out, it was me who got the surprise. Pulling into our driveway, I saw Jake's BMW parked in front of our garage. I wondered what he was doing here. I got out and put my hand on the hood of his car. It was pretty warm, so I knew he hadn't been here very long. I walked into the house and saw Alice sitting on the couch with Jake. I saw her quickly pull her hands away when I opened the door. I also noticed what she was wearing, a short black dress that revealed most of her legs and a large cleavage. There was also a rather thick odor of cigarette smoke in the house. "Tom, you're home," she said, standing up. Jake stood up too and looked at me with a smirk on his face. "Yeah, this is a surprise," he said. "You were supposed to be gone until tomorrow. What happened?" "We finished work a day early, so I decided to come home and spend some time with my wife," I said. "What's going on here?" "Jake was just about to take me out to dinner," Alice said. Jake smirked as he nodded his head. "I see," I said. Before I could speak, I turned to Jake. "Well, I'm home now, so if anyone is going to ask Alice out, it's going to be me, her husband. I think you should leave now." "And if I don't?" he asked. "Then I'll just have to kick your ass out of my house," I said. "You can be my boss at work, but not here in my house." He grinned and looked at Alice. "I'll take care of it," Alice said, looking at Jake. "I think you should leave now." Jake didn't say anything for a few moments, then nodded his head and got ready to leave. "I'll talk to John about it tomorrow," I said, before Jake opened the door to leave. "I don't think he'll approve of you hitting on an employee's wife." "You better not say anything to John," Jake said. "You're forgetting that my uncle is a senior member of the board. He has your job and John's in his hands. And don't forget you have to be in Jonesboro on Sunday." He turned to Alice. "I'll talk to you later," he added before closing the door. I turned to Alice again. "What the hell is going on here?" I asked. "Are you sleeping with him?" Alice didn't say anything but lowered her eyes in embarrassment. I had my own answer. "You are, aren't you?" "How long has this shit been going on?" "A while." "God damn it, Tom, you're never home," she said. "Yeah, because the asshole you're sleeping with keeps sending me out of town," I said. "Oh my God, Alice, how can you be so fucking stupid? You knew he was the one who sent me away. Surely you're smart enough to realize what he was doing. How many times have you slept with him in our bed?" "I don't know," she said. "I haven't counted." "Fucking amazing," I said. "Are you in love with him?" "A little bit, I'm afraid," she said. "But I'm still in love with you. I just want you home." "You know what that means, don't you?" I asked. "What?" she asked. "It means I'll get a divorce as soon as I can," I said. "There's no way I can live with that." "Please, Tom, don't," she said. "I don't want a divorce." "What are you going to do now?" she asked. "Do you still want to take me out to dinner?" "Are you kidding me?" I asked. "I'm going to have to get a motel room for the night." There's no way I'm sleeping in that bed again, not after you fucked him in it, and there's nowhere else for me to sleep. I'll be damned if I'm gonna try to sleep on the couch. Besides, the whole fucking place reeks of cigarettes. By the way, do you let him smoke in here? We both smoke in the house, she said. I'm sorry. I stood up and looked at her before I spoke, trying to contain my anger. Let me make one thing clear, I said. I'm going to find a motel room for the night. I'll stop by tomorrow while you're at work to pick up some of my stuff. If you bring that asshole into my house one more time before the divorce is final, you'll both be praying to God that you were never born into the world. Do you understand me? Yes, Alice said, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't help but wonder why she was crying. After all, she was the one who had caused all the pain. I rushed upstairs to grab my suitcase and some clothes and saw the ashtrays on both bedside tables. Both were filled with ashes and cigarette butts. The room smelled of stale cigarette smoke and sex. It was all I could do to keep from throwing up. I packed enough stuff for a couple days and then went back downstairs. Alice was still sitting on the couch. I'm leaving now, I said. Here, I added, taking off my wedding ring. I tossed it on the table in front of her. I won't be needing this anymore. Remember what I said. Goodbye. I walked out of the house, got in my car, and drove away. I don't know what she did after I left, and frankly, I didn't care. All I know is that she didn't flood me with calls or texts after I left. I found a motel that rented out rooms with kitchenettes for the week and paid 2 weeks in advance. However, I had a feeling I'd be there a little longer, and I didn't want to risk the room being occupied when I got back from Jonesboro. I made myself comfortable, and it was that night that the nightmares started. The next day, I got to work a little early and turned in all my paperwork. Intentionally avoiding Jake, I went to see John Carlson, who was next in my chain of command. Tom, you're here early, he said. How did it go? It went well, John, I said. I've already turned in my paperwork. Look, I have a personal problem I need to deal with before I leave for Jonesboro, and I was wondering if I could take the rest of the day off. Have you talked to Jake yet? He asked. Well, Jake is part of my problem, I said. He looked at me in surprise. Oh? He asked. Do you want to tell me about it? I spent the next few minutes telling him about what had happened the previous night and what Alice had told me. I need to get some more of my things and go to the divorce lawyer today, I said. That's why I came to you instead of going to Jake's. I see, John said. Good. Go and do what you need to do. I'll take care of Jake. And listen, if you need to talk to anyone, feel free to call me anytime. I thanked him and walked out of the building. Luckily, I was able to avoid seeing Jake. I went into a cafe and had a quick breakfast while searching online for a divorce lawyer on my smartphone. I found one and made an appointment for the same day. After finishing breakfast, I looked at the time and figured Alice had already left for work, so I headed towards what used to be our house. Her car was nowhere to be seen, so I parked and went inside. The room still smelled like cigarettes, but not as strong as last night. I went upstairs and grabbed some more of my stuff and carried it to my car. I grabbed some garbage bags, filled as many as I could carry, and put them in my car as well. I figured out that I would need a place to store all of this junk and made a mental note to rent one later that day. I went into my workshop and took inventory of everything I had in there. Naturally, I couldn't hide it all in my car, and I knew I'd have to go back for it. Then I found something I had forgotten about, a small round container with about 10 old CS training pills, the kind I used in the gas chamber. For those who don't know, CS, or 2-chlorobenzylidine malononitrile, is one of the most commonly used tear gases by police and military. Technically, it's not really a gas like hydrogen or oxygen. It's more like tiny particles that get into literally everything. Clothes, hair, eyes, whatever. We use these pills to simulate a chemical attack when we did gas chamber training, and it's extremely effective. When I was in the service, we used to take 1 or 2 of these pills and put them on a metal plate. The plate would heat up and the capsules would melt, releasing the gas. 2 capsules were usually more than enough for a decent workout in the gas chamber. A person exposed to CS would experience a burning sensation on exposed skin, tearing in the eyes, and burning irritation of the mucous membranes of the nose, mouth, and throat. This leads to coughing, severe nasal discharge, disorientation, and difficulty breathing. It's not a pleasant sensation, but it goes away pretty quickly after a shower. I used to do impromptu field workouts by surreptitiously pouring some CS powder into ashtrays, usually when we went into the field. Since the chemical reacts with heat, anyone using the ashtray would end up in their own personal little gas chamber. I had a bad thought and carried the capsules into the house. I opened a capsule and poured the powder into one ashtray, then did the same with the other. If Alice and Jake decided to enjoy a cigarette after intercourse, they would be in for a surprise. This will wean them off smoking in my house, I thought. I went through the house and did the same with a couple of other ashtrays, which I discovered were used. But I didn't stop there. I took a couple of capsules, opened them, and sprinkled the powder on the bottom sheet of the bed and 2 pillows, then carefully put the top sheet and bedspread back in place. I thought about sprinkling some CS on the stove, but decided against it. I only had 4 capsules left, and I wanted enough for the return trip. I decided that what I had already done would be enough, at least for now. The last order of business was to get my guns, my personal laptop, and our tax returns for the last 2 years, which the lawyer said she wanted to see. I locked the guns in the trunk of my car, then locked up the house and left. I headed to a storage unit, rented a small space, and hid my stuff until I found another place I could call home. When I finished unloading my car, I locked the storage unit and noticed that I had just enough time for a quick burger before meeting with my lawyer. I arrived at Lisa Hawkins' law office right on time and was ushered into her office. She listened to my story, taking notes as I spoke. She didn't say anything until I was finished. "Well, Mr. Langley, that's quite a story," she said. "Do you see any way to repair your marriage?" "No, I don't," I said. "Good," she said. "Well, for starters, Missouri is a limited no-fault state, but you can invoke her betrayal because it might affect the distribution of marital property. You don't have any children, so there won't be any child support issues. From the tax forms you brought, I see that your wife earned a little less than you, but in my opinion, not enough to require any spousal maintenance. What about the house? Do you want to keep it?" "No," I told her. "I can't live there anymore. She can keep it if she wants to." "Or you could sell it and split the proceeds, but I doubt you have very much equity in the place," she said. "I might suggest you sell it and see what she says in her reply." "That's fine," I said. "Can I get back at Jake for what he did?" She shook her head. "You mean the alienation of affection?" she asked. I nodded my head. "No, I'm afraid that's not an option in Missouri. There hasn't been anything like that since about 2003. "You say he's your boss?" "Yes," I said. "Well, then I'd recommend you go over his head, maybe talk to his boss or your company's HR department." "You work at Empire Tech, right?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "Well, you're in luck," she said. "I happen to know that they don't tolerate this kind of behavior. Talk to them. Let them know what's going on. I'm sure they'll work with you. If they don't, come back and we'll discuss it, okay?" "That sounds like fun," I said. "Thank you." "Okay, I'll start the paperwork," she said. "Where would you like her to be notified?" "It would be nice to visit her at work," I said. Lisa smiled at that. "Okay," she said. "Now, don't do anything stupid. That also means no dating. The court won't take it very favorably at all. I'd also recommend you see a counselor." She pulled out a business card and handed it to me. I recognized the name, Dr. Rose Carlson, John's wife. "Got it, thanks," I said. We finalized the appointment and I paid the retainer after she handed me a checklist of things she said would help protect me financially. We only had one joint credit card through our bank, so I canceled the card, withdrew half of what we had in the bank, and opened a new account in my name only. From there, I grabbed a bite to eat and headed back to the motel. I didn't hear from Alice until late that afternoon. I recognized her number when it popped up on my smartphone. I decided to take the call. "You son of a bitch," she wailed. "What did you do to the house?" she asked. It was then that I realized exactly what had happened. "I don't know what you're talking about," I lied. "Yes, you do, you bastard," she said. "You put something in the ashtrays, and there's something in the bed." "You mean besides you and Jake?" I asked. God damn it, she said. Tell me what you did. We can't even use the bedroom. We? I asked. The next voice belonged to my boss, and he was not happy. Damn it, Tom, what have you done? This whole place looks like a fucking gas chamber or something, he growled. I'm going to kick your fucking ass. What are you doing in my bed with my wife, you son of a bitch? I asked. If anyone deserves to get his ass kicked, it's you. You're going to pay for this, motherfucker, he threatened. I'll be sure to relay your little threat to John and my lawyer, I said. Now bye-bye. I ended the call and started counting to 10. The phone rang again before I counted to 7. I ignored the call and sent it to voicemail. I couldn't keep from smiling as I thought about what had just happened in the bedroom. Something told me they wouldn't be sleeping on that bed tonight. I slept pretty well that night, except for one nightmare in which I dreamed I was shooting 2 traitors with a machine gun. I slept all the next day and didn't get out of bed until about 10:30. I went to brunch and was surprised when Alice sat down at my table. What a surprise, I said. How did you sleep last night? I think you know how I slept last night, she said. I was driving by and saw your car, so I thought I'd come by and see you. What do you want, Alice? I asked. I'm trying to enjoy a good breakfast. I want to talk, she said, about us. There is no us anymore, Alice, I said. You got that way when you decided to fuck my boss. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. I was just lonely. And you don't think I was? I asked. You knew damn well I was gone because your fucking buddy sent me away. By the way, I met with my lawyer yesterday. She's filing the divorce papers. You should be notified sometime next week. But I don't want a divorce, she said quietly. And I don't want a cheating whore as a wife, I told her. Don't worry, I'm leaving you the house unless you want to sell it. Any way is good for me, and your credit card doesn't work anymore. I know, she said. I found out this morning when I was trying to pay for gas. I had to use cash. Tell me, what did you do to the house yesterday? I have no idea what you're talking about, I said. I just came by to pick up some more of my stuff, especially my guns and my computer. Tell me, what happened? Well, Jake and I were enjoying a cigarette in the bedroom before we went to bed, she said. I know you don't like smoking in the house, but we figured you weren't coming back, so it didn't make a difference. Right after we put out our cigarettes, we both felt a burning sensation. We started coughing and snot dripped from our noses. I knew you did something, but I didn't know what it was. Well, I guess you won't be smoking in the bedroom anymore, I said. So, what did you do? Went to Jake's apartment? Yes, we spent the night there, she said. Nothing happened, though. Neither of us were ready for it by then. That's just too damn bad, I told her sarcastically. What are you doing now? I'm going back to air out the house and clean up the bedroom, she said. Look, I know it's over between us, but I was wondering if there was any way we could at least part as friends. I couldn't believe this woman's stamina. I set my fork aside and looked at her before I said anything. Friends, I asked. You did the worst thing a woman can do to someone she claims to love. You betrayed my trust and broke my heart by sleeping with my boss, in my house and in my bed. And you have the nerve to ask if we can be friends? Let me tell you something, bitch. Right now, it takes everything I have to keep from killing you right here with my bare hands. As I spoke, her eyes widened and her face went white. Don't you have any feelings for me at all? She asked, tears streaming down her face. Yes, I said. I used to love you with all my heart. Not anymore. As much as I used to love you, I hate you now. You hate me, she snorted. With every fiber of my being, I told her. And you'd better tell Jake that if he bothers me, I'm going to rip his head off. Alice recoiled when I spoke. She'd never seen this side of me before. She grabbed her purse and stood up. Now, if you don't mind, I'd like to finish my breakfast in peace. Right now, the sight of you is making my stomach churn. Yeah, I'm sorry, Tom, she sobbed before turning to leave. I watched her get into her car and drive away. Good riddance to bad trash, I thought to myself. However, I couldn't keep from smiling, knowing that they hadn't encountered the CS I'd sprinkled on the bed. I spent the rest of the day doing practically nothing. I drove around town, took a walk in the park, and then eventually watched the game at a bar while sipping a couple beers. I thought about going home and picking up some more of my stuff, but changed my mind, not knowing how I could handle being around Alice. After that, I went back to the motel and packed my things for the trip to Jonesboro. One day I heard from Alice the Tuesday after she had been served with divorce papers at work. She was not very happy and felt humiliated when the process administrator said she was being served divorce papers because of her betrayal. "How could you humiliate me like that?" she asked. "How could you humiliate me by screwing my boss, bitch?" I growled back at her before ending the conversation. I also received a threatening email from Jake, which I forwarded to John. John wrote me back, asking me not to worry about Jake. "If all goes well, he'll be gone by the end of the week," John said. Good, I thought. He can take that whore with him. Now I'm getting ready to head back. In a way, it's probably a good thing I've been out of town to deal with the traitors the last few days. No one knows what I could have done. Looking at my watch, I saw that the time was nearing 5 a.m., so I decided to shower, have breakfast, and head back. I was on the road heading home around 6:30 on Thursday. I had a pretty long drive ahead of me, so I took advantage of this time to relax. As I approached my hometown, I turned on the radio to my favorite local station, hoping to hear the morning news. At least one person is reported dead and another is in critical condition after firefighters responded to an incident on Old Mill Road, the announcer said. Old Mill Road? That's the road my house is on, I thought. I turned up the volume and listened further. An explosion reportedly destroyed the second floor of an old farmhouse on Old Mill Road late Wednesday night, the announcer added. Firefighters responded but were unable to tackle the blaze. 2 people were pulled from the house. One of them was pronounced dead at the scene. It is unknown what started the fire. I had a bad feeling about it and decided to stop by the house just in case. When I got there, I was shocked by what I saw. The house was completely destroyed. All that was left was a smoking ruin and a brick fireplace. I saw 2 cars outside the workshop. One belonged to Alice and the other to Jake. The workshop where all my tools were located seemed untouched. I pulled into the driveway and was stopped by a couple of firemen. "I'm sorry, sir, but you're going to have to leave," one of them told me. I pulled out my license and showed them my license. "This is my house," I said. "I've been in Jonesboro since Sunday. What happened?" "Someone reported an explosion late last night," said the fireman. "We got crews here as fast as we could, but it was too late." "I heard on the radio that 2 people were pulled out," I said. "My wife was here last night. What happened to her?" "Yes, sir," said the fireman. The woman was pulled out of the house. She was pretty badly injured and was taken to the burn center of the city hospital. I don't know who she was, and I haven't received any news of her condition." "And the other man?" I asked. The firefighter looked down before shaking his head. "I'm sorry, sir, but he didn't make it," the fireman said. I nodded my head. "What was the cause of this?" I asked, pointing to the remains of the house. The fireman looked at the pile of charred rubble and shook his head. "I'm not sure yet," he said. "We're still investigating. You might want to contact your insurance company." I nodded my head and got out of the car. I got to my motel and called John to tell him the news. "I'm sorry to hear that, Tom," he told me. "Just so you know, yesterday the board agreed to fire Jake from his job. He was going to be fired today. Why don't you stop by the hospital and check on Alice? Take the rest of the day off." "Thanks," I told him. "I'll see you tomorrow." I went to the hospital and found the room where Alice had been taken. I spoke briefly with the nurse on duty and gave her my insurance information. It was then that I learned that she had 2nd and 3rd-degree burns covering more than half of her body. "She was lucky to be alive," the nurse said. "Can I see her?" I asked. "Not now," the nurse said. "We've prescribed antibiotics and she's been sedated. The doctor says she'll probably need skin grafts." "Let me know when I can see her," I said, giving the nurse my cell phone number. I went back to my room and cried. Don't ask me why. Maybe it was grief over the years I spent with Alice, but I don't know. What I do know is that most of the hatred I had for her is now gone. Before she slept with Jake, she was the love of my life. I went online and filed a claim with my insurance company. According to the website, I would be informed of their intentions within 30 days. That night, I fell asleep for the first time without reliving my nightmare. Over the next few days, I confirmed that Jake had died in the explosion. John also informed me that Jake's job was now mine if I wanted it. What the hell? I thought. I figured I might as well take it since it would mean more money and not as much travel. I spent a couple days looking for a decent apartment and found one. I moved my stuff in, set up the apartment, and spent the weekend picking up tools from the old workshop. While I was there, I wandered around the ruins of our house looking for anything that could be salvaged. Unfortunately, I didn't find anything useful. A few days later, I got a call from the hospital saying I could see and talk to Alice. I entered her room and looked at her. Most of her body was covered in bandages. I walked to the edge of her bed and looked down at her. She looked up at me with one eye, and I saw tears streaming down her face. "Can you talk?" I asked. She nodded her head slightly, and with just one lip, she said, "Yes." "What happened?" "We went out Wednesday night," she said. "When we got back, I asked Jake to light the fireplace in the bedroom. He lit it on Monday, and we used it for 2 nights without any problems." "What?" I asked, stunned. "Don't you remember I told you not to put gas in that thing until we replaced the insert? What were you thinking?" "I'm sorry," she said. "Go on," I said. "Well, Jake saw that the fireplace was off, so he checked to see if the gas was on, then lit a match to start the fireplace. And that's when it happened," she said. "I heard a loud pop, and the next thing I know, I woke up here. That's why I shut off the gas in that thing," I said. "I told you it was too dangerous to turn it on." "I guess I forgot," she said. "Well, Jake's dead now," I told her. Tears were streaming down her face. "And the house is completely destroyed, just like our marriage." "I really messed up, didn't I?" she asked. "Yes, you did," I told her. "What's going to happen now?" she asked. "Well, they told me that you'll probably need skin grafts," I said. "It's going to be very expensive. I don't know if your insurance will cover that." "What about us?" she asked. "I already told you there's no us anymore," I said. "You screwed that up too. The divorce will go on," I added as she sobbed. "But I'll keep my insurance on you until you get through this." "Thank you for that," she said. "Do you still hate me?" "Not as much as I used to," I said. "But I still don't like you very much." "I understand, Tom," she said. "Anyway, I'll leave you alone for now," I said. "I just hope you've learned your lesson." "What's that?" she asked. "If you play with fire, you'll get burned," I said before leaving the room. Epilogue. Much to my surprise, the insurance company stood up for me, and I received a check for the damage to the house. After the mortgage was paid off, there wasn't much left, and I had no intention of remodeling, so I talked to Alice and we agreed to sell the property and split the proceeds. She stayed in the hospital for quite a while. The newspaper put her on an extended paid vacation while she recovered. The divorce went through just as my attorney said it would, and after 60 days, I was a free man. In the meantime, I started seeing Rose, and she was doing a great job helping me with my anger issues. I kept my word to Alice and kept her on my insurance until she was well enough to get around on her own. The doctors did a wonderful job on her, and the skin grafts seemed to take root just fine. She was no longer as beautiful as she had been when we got married, but she still looked pretty good despite her scars. As a final gesture, I helped her get settled into her new apartment. I handed her the keys to the apartment after the furniture was moved in. "I hope you like it," I said. "I made sure to pick one that didn't have a fireplace." She laughed, taking the keys. "Thank you, Tom," she said, and tears came to her eyes. "I appreciate it. You're a good man, Tom, and you deserve a good woman. I'm sorry I ruined things for us." I nodded my head. "Yeah, well, I guess that's the way it is," I told her, giving her one last hug. "You take care of yourself." "I will," she said before I walked out. What now? I asked myself. I pulled out my phone and looked through my contacts. I couldn't believe that so many women had given me their phone numbers over the past few months. I found the right number and called. "Hi," I heard a woman's voice. Yes, this is Tom, I said. Are you busy tonight? I was busy until you called, Nancy said. I met Nancy a couple weeks ago at a club in town. She had dark blue eyes and legs that weren't going anywhere. Would you like some more of my lasagna? She asked. You know it, I said. Well, come on over, she said. I'll heat it up for you. I'm on my way, I said, ending the conversation. Yeah, sometimes playing with a little fire is just what the doctor ordered.